couple of little things that I wanted to correct from the previous video on ROSTERMANIA. Malek didn't go back to Evil Geniuses. That was like hotly touted that he would in the absence of Stewie. I believe from talking to people behind the scenes that was discussed. It was a possibility, but in the end, Malek decided not to do it for whatever reason, and probably because you would have a strange, weird, fucked up pool of like 20 players to be working with, because the way Evil Geniuses are marketing their current team is that it is one team of like 20 players or whatever it is, and they can all interchange as needed. Now, I don't know why they're doing it that way. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, frankly. I don't see the benefit. I don't see the upside, and it looks to have taken the stupid, 10-man roster idea of Astralis, which we all know can't work, and then it took it to just a ridiculous conclusion, like the Spinal Tap. This goes up to 11. Evil Geniuses goes up to 20. I don't get it. I don't know why they've done that. And if I was a coach, I wouldn't want to sort of work under those conditions, especially because it seems to be that some players have been promised to other parts and others are a fucking nightmare. Anyway, the coach that did go for it is a Danish chap called Daniel Vorborg. Not a coach that's had like particularly long tenure, hasn't coached a lot of teams. He was a manager at Copenhagen Flames, and then he moved into the coaching role at Copenhagen Flames. I don't know how much pedigree that is. It's certainly not the type of pedigree I would want for Evil Geniuses, and ultimately not as great an option as Malek would have been. But at the end of the day, it's a coach. It's a European coach. It's probably better than them picking up some washed-up North American player who's one of their friends to be their coach. And we'll see what Vorborg's able to do with Evil Geniuses. Spoiler, it's not going to be much. So I did want to correct that because he got left out of the last ROSTERMANIA. So let's get to one of the big ones. Apex. They've been making some moves in the roster market. Now, first up, one of the moves that they made was Stiko, who obviously is their tenured player, formerly of Mouse Sports. He has said he's going to be moving into an in-game leadership role on the team. Obviously, I know Martin as a player. I know him through his involvement in the CSPPA. We've had him on the podcast. He's a super intelligent dude. I think he is really smart. I think he's one of those players who could definitely have the chops to be an in-game leader, but it's also got to be said, it's like he's now taking that leap, taking that plunge, and doing it at a time when, a lot of teams around Apex who were touted to be this little surprise package. You probably remember I did a podcast with Maui Snake. We were talking about which teams we expected to maybe surprise and break into that top 15. They were one of my picks, and, not without reason. They've got a roster, just the core of the roster, prior to Cillian and Chauzy getting benched. Nork, remember him from, NIP, did absolutely nothing wrong, got replaced by Device, didn't work out, one of those. Jacob obviously was in pretty good form with the Aussies just before, he ended up on this team. I actually think that's like, three really good players, irrespective of whether or not Stiko's an IGL. And then they've recently announced JL. JL is a Lithuanian player that was briefly in that clusterfuck of the Mad Lions team where they atom smashed together a bunch of players. And certainly, he had some games, he had some moments, maybe not like a crazy signing or a crazy name, but don't worry, Apex have got you covered with the move that nobody saw coming, and they've added Shox. That's Shox, S-H-O-X, to the roster. Now, to talk about Shox, it's kind of interesting because it's a huge signing for a team of Apex's caliber and standing. Obviously, don't forget, they've got Kuban as a coach as well. So there is now a lot of Tier 1 experience permeating through this team, and Shox is unquestionably a Hall of Famer. He's someone who's going to be remembered after he does decide to hang up his spurs as one of the greatest natural talents to ever touch the game, and obviously to do the same in Source before it. But listen, I'll temper the expectations here. While this is a huge move in terms of putting Apex on the map as an organization and someone that can like mix it up and maybe contend with the spending power necessary to bring in some stars. Obviously, we all remember the shocks that we saw at Team Liquid, where frankly, he was a bit of an embarrassment by the high standards he set at various points in his career. We all want him to do well. He's like one of those guys who's like, he's a legend of the game, but it got painful towards the end. I mean, it really did. If you go and look at some of the games where Team Liquid had like close performances and where they were like, you know, almost over the line or whatever, or just falling short, Shox' underperformances were a factor. He got found out a number of times with some of the newer teams, and certainly it was not a great way to sign off. Obviously, his last performance was at IEM Dallas. It's a diminished field for sure. You just want a North American team to perform well there and, you know, do whatever it is that they can. Unfortunately, Shox was really, really poor at that tournament, was like, couldn't justify his position on the Team Liquid lineup anymore. I think his overall rating was 0.86 for that tournament. At the end of the day, it's just one of those where you couldn't in good conscience keep him on. Now, he did release a twit longer after he left Team Liquid, and, you know, it put a lot of his underperformances in context. He was talking about how he was all set to move to North America, and then he ran into like visa issues and visa problems, and he was moving, you know, he moving back and forth. He didn't really know what to do. Put a lot of strain on his relationship with, I believe now, his wife. And so obviously, look, you know, end of the day, maybe it's one of those that where it just didn't work out because of timing and the inherent problems in a post-pandemic world of trying to get everybody in one place at one time to optimal efficiency. But at the end of the day, I've got my reservations about the type of player we're going to see here. If the same level of Shox is coming into Apex, it's actually going to be a really underwhelming pickup. Now, I couldn't tell you how that's going to pan out. I don't know how Stico's going to work as an IGL or what plans he's going to have for him. But you can be, I think, cautiously optimistic about Apex and what they're going to do moving forward. I feel good about them breaking into the top 15 at least. I think there's certainly been enough flux and ups and downs to suggest that's a viable target for them to set themselves and hold on to by the end of the year. But ultimately, I don't want to go all in on the idea that just because they've signed Shox, they're suddenly going to be some sort of powerhouse, and all of that like legendary status he has is going to somehow make a fundamental difference to this team. Ultimately, he is 30 years old. He's getting into those final years. So this one for me, single thumbs up overall for how they've constructed the squad, but certainly that could easily be shaky hands for that one. So we talked a little bit about this. Heat confirmed Jax. We talked a little bit about Jax. Always kind of felt a bit sorry for him. You know, not a lot of people had a lot of confidence in how well he was going to do at G2, and he really exceeded his expectations in the early stages of his G2 career. Obviously, now he's been replaced by Reddit's favorite player, a thread about him every day about how amazing he is. He's been replaced by JKS, and it is an upgrade, I think, just based on current form, where Jax is, where JKS is, the relative strengths, the positions they're going to play. But obviously, as well, it's kind of a shame that if Jax was replaced by almost anyone else, he would have got kind of more of a fanfare or more of a send-off and would have been more, you know, fondly remembered. But that's not going to happen, is it? And of course, as well, joining Heat, I actually like this Heat team. They've got the real capability to go beyond what Falcons are doing. And we actually saw Falcons beat OG, I think it was, in these RMR Open qualifiers. Those were all a clusterfuck, though, so don't read too much into that. But I think I feel good about it. You know, Afro, Jocko, you've got a little bit of experience in there with Body. They've got Matt Hend at coach. I think Heat are definitely going to be another one of those teams on the come up, pushing up the rankings. And I think Jax is actually going to bring a lot of experience from his time in G2 to this roster and be able to play and compete at a high level. So I think this is a good pickup for them. I'm glad it's official. Obviously, he's only going to be making a fraction of the money he would have made at G2. I'm sure he'd much rather be at G2. He might even prefer to be on the bench at G2. Who really knows? But at the end of the day, happy that that's been officially confirmed. Next up, Copenhagen Flames. Probably surprised a few people, and they've decided to get another roster in. And you go, Richard, why would that surprise you? Well, let's be clear. They sort of agreed to sell off all of their players, atom smash them apart. They were looking to sell them as one team. Nearly happened with Complexity, didn't it? But then it didn't. And then they were like, okay, well, we're definitely selling them. They are available, and we're going to let them go and just approach us. And of course, they've now all been broken apart. And at that point, you go, well, look, you've sold the players. You've made your money. You've talked about how difficult it was to make the money. Remember, the founder of Copenhagen Flames said in many interviews he didn't understand where reports about them pricing themselves out the market had come, and said that they were very reasonable and you could have had the team all in for $500,000. Of course, that doesn't tell the full story, because it's $500,000 to acquire all of those players, fine, but then you've got to meet their salary demands and any other things that are necessary to running that team. So for me, what I expected to happen was Copenhagen Flames have come in, built a team, placed reasonably well, got some, stick of money, sold their players, and now you just fuck off, don't you, and you pocket the cash. But no, they've decided that they're going to stick around, pretend they're a real organization, and now they've built another roster, which again is almost entirely Danish, and it's made up of, some not unfamiliar names. Crucially, at the heart of it all, Bird from Sky. Everyone's favourite online in-game leader. A very divisive figure, simply because in his previous team, Ecstatic, they would win or certainly go far in a lot of online tournaments, a lot of these ones that are made by gambling sites and whatnot, and people just assumed because they'd never heard of him or some of the players on Ecstatic before, they must be cheating. But as I said prior to this, there's never been any sort of concrete video evidence that you would even point to and go, oh, that's a bit weird. I've never seen any clips of this player doing anything particularly strange. The ones that people have pulled out actually are easily explainable if you just know anything about the game and just use your common sense about contextual stuff. So for me, the cheating allegations, I'm not saying they're not true, I'm just saying there's certainly no evidence to substantiate them. And he's coming in now, and obviously he's playing with some players that have played on tier 1 teams. And so he's going to be lining up side against Borup, obviously formerly of Heroic. That's a player that's played at tier 1. He's going to be playing with Rals, another player that's been at tier 1. Obviously Regali coming over from Fnatic Academy into Copenhagen Flames. And the lineup's going to be rounded out by TMB. So this is a roster that, much like some of the other ones that we're discussing here that they've just finally put together, who knows? Who really knows what this could do? I certainly don't have any, high hopes for it. I don't think it's going to, surprise anyone. I think they got banged out pretty early on in the RMR as well, and that's the only time we've even seen this lineup play, because they're not currently operational in any of the big leagues, I don't think. We're going to watch this space on that. But at the end of the day, I do feel that this could be one of those lineups that's going to spoil at tournaments, and we're going to find out just how real an IGL Bird from Sky is. A little bit of experience there with Borup. I've got to be honest, I thought Regali, I don't think he really got to showcase what a good player he is. He certainly seems to be highly regarded by a lot of other pros who think he's got a lot of potential. So, that could be a very powerful pickup for them. And if they are as tactically good as the old Ecstatic lineup suggests that it would be, you're probably going to see them, do well in those tier 2 tournaments, maybe get a few little trophies on some of those, Betway Cups or whatever it is online, the pinnacles of this world. But I don't think they've got enough caliber to really do well in tier 1 tournaments and upset people in that regard. There you go, Blame F in the chat. And yes, Blame F, a guy who says he loves Bird from Sky. So, you know, who knows? A solid IGL is worth its weight in gold for any project. And if he turns out to be the real deal, remember, he's only 28. Still got some time to post up some decent numbers, win some trophies, and develop some of this talent. So I'll be watching it with interest. Very surprised to see Copenhagen Flames still in the space. A little bit of news here, not too super exciting. But Movistar Riders have added their 5th player. Obviously, we talked about Sun Pius going to Ents. Sun Pius going to Ents. That's going to be one of the moves of ROSTERMANIA. Easily probably one of the best signings when you consider it didn't cost them very much money at all. I think Sun Pius is going to be one of the big pickups, and I think it's like a blockbuster move for Ents. Anyway, Movistar had to replace him. They replaced him with a player called Antonio Martinez Sanchez. It seems to me that, you know, having seen them in action in the subsequent aftermath, like, you can't replace a player like Sun Pius. That's just the sad reality. They're going to really, really struggle. With Sun Pius, they were the most improved team in European Counter-Strike easily. World Counter-Strike, obviously. They climbed into the top 10 rankings. You didn't think it was possible for an all-Spanish lineup to do it. And now they obviously go into another Pro League season where it's going to be really tough for them, I think. You know, they're in a group with Liquid, Furia, Cloud9, Evil Geniuses, and Eternal Fire. They're losing a big player. They're certainly going to struggle against Liquid and Furia and Cloud9. Evil Geniuses, they should be able to beat. Eternal Fire, they should be able to beat. But, you know, keep in mind, they had a deep run in the last Pro League season. It's going to hurt them. It's going to hurt them to not have Sun Pius there. It's going to hurt them to not be able to match that finish. And so, listen, I don't think you're going to get much out of this roster. I think they got knocked out pretty early on in the RMR qualifiers as well. It's sad. But it's one of those. And, you know, at the end of the day, Sun Pius getting an opportunity at the top team is no less than he deserves. It's just a shame Movistar Riders have to suffer as a result of it. But that's sports, isn't it? That's just how it works. It's hard to believe how ridiculous the Brazilian scene is getting for recycling talent. But let's just do it. Let's talk about KNG. KNG, my old friend Vito. Good to see him back. Still riding it out. Remember, this is a guy we're going to look back on. It's probably the biggest waste of CS talent, maybe of all time. It just seems to me to be ridiculous, like where he is right now. But he's now back with O Plano. O Plano being the org that was created by the guys when they left MIBR after a pay dispute. O Plano being the plan, because they apparently had a plan to create their own org and get funding for it, all of which turned out not to be true, leading to the meme No Plano. Well, now he's back there with Nekiz and Yell, a player called Cake, a player called Piriazin, and Kogu is going to coach them. Again, legendary AWPer. He's going to be coaching them. And you just have to wonder, what does rock bottom look like? KNG did say he's looking forward to playing again, and he won't talk too much, which unfortunately for him, it's about 5 years too late. Because if he just sort of kept his mouth shut, you know, along the way, it would have had a much better career. This roster, for me, is certainly well past its best. I've never rated Yell. I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion or not. Yell is now 30. He is a veteran. KNG is 29. Nekiz is a player, 26, who actually feels like he's already peaked to a certain degree, had his best before him. Cake has been around, not a name that's going to be in the household. So Piriazin is their young player, their young hot prospect that they're hoping to sort of get some firepower out of, if you like. But honestly, KNG is far and away the best player on this roster, has historically played at the highest level for me, has the highest skill ceiling. It's just going to be impossible to see him, like, drag these players, you know, over the line into doing something good. Obviously, Yell is going to be the in-game leader. Even though this team is comprised, I think there's like 3 players on the roster that can pick up the AWP. They did clarify Yell will not be AWPing, which make of that what you will. Yell was a terrible AWPer but he was an AWPer for a significant period of his career. And so KNG is going to be the main AWPer. You're probably going to see Yell on that secondary AWP, although people aren't running a lot of secondary AWP at the moment due to the economy. So I don't know. I feel his team is a bit of a nothing, and O Plano just continues to disappoint. It's just a shame, really, because when you think of what could have been. This is Sprout. Obviously lost the legendary duo of Dennis and Spiddy. They went on to play somewhere else. I can't even remember the name of the org that they went to, but they did go together. They lost Riles as well. So they had a little bit to do. I gotta say, low-key, the best bit of advice I think I could give to anyone who's a bedroom org aspirant, somebody that wants to run a budget organization and run it well, you should just go and look at all of the things that Sprout have done down the years. Sprout are essentially a feeder team for Big. We know that to be true. But in terms of tier 2 in Europe, in terms of competing in the secondary leagues outside of the ESL Pro League and competing in competitions of that stature, Sprout are one of the most consistent performers across a period of about 5 years. They're always there. They've always had lineups that are competitive. They've always produced talent that they've been able to sell, typically to Big, but to bigger organizations in general, and they appear to have done it all within a very rigid budgetary framework and do it successfully. You cannot buy that. That would take so much skill that in the same way, if I was looking at people that could successfully scout for me or build me a successful team, the people behind Sprout absolutely have to be given credit for all that they've achieved and the players that they've had on the books down the years. So anyway, who have they brought in? This is a banger pickup, guys. This is like legit a great bit of business because they brought in Zyphon, the 18-year-old, I believe formerly of Astralis Talent, who was in the Copenhagen Flames team. And I always thought Zyphon actually got ignored because everyone else was getting applauded. You had Roy popping off as an entry fragger, obviously Nikita's popping off, now in Fnatic, both of them. And, a lot of people just didn't give this kid sort of the attention I thought he was due. If you talk to pros, as I do at events, or used to, when I would go to events, they would all say the same thing, that they felt he could be the next big thing out of Denmark. He had the skill ceiling, but it was his attitude. People used to say that his attitude was holding him back. I don't know about that. I don't know if he's toxic or whatever the buzzword for it is these days, but word on the street was that he could get a little bit frustrated also as well. Kind of felt that there was apparently chatter behind the scenes that he was a bit upset. I don't know if this is true, by the way, but players told me this. He was a bit upset he didn't get as much attention as some of his other Copenhagen Flames teammates when he thought he was playing particularly well. So I don't know. But at the end of the day, he's 18-year-old. He played in a relatively successful team that broke out from the position Sprout are in to mix it up with the big boys, and they brought in Refresh. And what's interesting about this move is Refresh is going to be the team's IGL. First time he's been an in-game leader in his career, but let's just talk about his performances towards the end of his time in Heroic. Now, it's no surprise to anyone who's watched, me on a podcast before. I've been a fan of Refresh for a long time. I wanted him to stick around at Cloud9 when he didn't, and he turned it down. I wanted him to get picked up by a good team. When he had the move to Heroic, I was very positive about it, and I think it worked at the start. I think he had some outstanding games, some outstanding series, and in the Heroic jersey produced some outstanding moments. But let's be real, there were a number of occasions when the lands started coming back, and Heroic were a basket case team. Heroic did not have mental fortitude. Heroic had Cadian, who would 1 minute be the perfect lightning rod and say all the right things, to the next minute just be in a cavalcade of cringe and drawing negative attention to players that we know don't have a lot of mental strength. And so Refresh seemed to be the player that suffered the most. The disparity between his online performances and his LAN performances became particularly pronounced, and it seemed that the writing was on the wall after that Na'Vi match they had at the Major. He had a really rough time at the Major, no doubt about it. And even though they went out, I think he played his last games in a Pinnacle Cup that Heroic won, where they beat Astralis. At the end of the day, he was out after that, and we didn't know where he was going to end up next. Since then, he has played just a few days ago in the Road to Rio RMRs, which, by the way, Sprout topped it out. And Refresh had relatively, good performances. Not so much in the final, but if you look at the run Sprout had, they beat Entropic, best of 1, fair enough. They beat Ecstatic, best of 3. They beat Mouse, best of 1. These were just for the seedings. And they beat Falcons. And, Refresh did have some maps where he contributed to that. Even when he was bottom fragging, he wasn't massively off the pace. And so remember, this is a new IGL and first time out in an RMR where they're playing superior opposition in terms of world rankings. They've been able to overcome them. So, listen, this move looks to be very, very good. I wonder what we're going to see out of Sprout next. And so, yes, for me, 2 thumbs up for this. Very, very good indeed. Oh, yes, the other big one. Spinx officially signed for Vitality. Now, this was obviously talked about for a while. People didn't know whether or not it was going to happen, but in the end, the move went ahead. There weren't any issues with work permits or anything like that. It might not be the most successful out of the gate. We'll wait and see. But in terms of big signings, this is absolutely huge. Spinx is going to be in the top 10 HLTV players this year, I think. He's had some absolutely amazing performances when he's been playing for Ents. He was one of the most highly sought after players from the top teams. Everyone was taking a look at him when it became known he might be available. And in the end, Vitality are the organization that have the money and the desire to bring him in. And I know that we had the Blast results today, and they didn't go Vitality's way. Astralis had a fantastic comeback against them. But, Spinx looked fine. He didn't look out of position. He looked to bed in with the team pretty well. They beat OG and they beat Ninjas in Pajamas relatively comfortably. And Spinx overall, stood out from the crowd. I think he had a couple of maps where he outfragged Ziwu. It was Danish Dynamite today for the most part. But yeah, I feel that certainly the Vitality I saw today actually looked better than the Vitality that I'd seen recently. The one that was really inconsistent, very slow to get going in games. And now, they've got an additional player, an additional piece of firepower that they can rely on to get them out of a jam. Now, that said, they don't want to rely on him too much. This is going to be a learning curve. There's still going to be issues around communication on the team. Remember, they are communicating in English. You are always going to lose a step when you do that. It's, a French, Danish, and now Israel hybrid, Danish coach behind them. So it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. But certainly it feels like an upgrade for Vitality. I would back Vitality to be challenging for honors for the remainder of the year. And I think Spinx is going to be a really good signing for them. Add a bit of firepower and a bit of consistency that they can rely on. So very happy about that. Cautious 1 thumb up, could be 2 thumbs up. We'll have to wait and see though. This was interesting. This has got nothing to do with ROSTERMANIA per se. Ordinarily I wouldn't talk about him. Order came in and announced a player called Vexite to come in, or Vexit, to come in and replace Hats. Hats obviously has played on that team for a bit. That I was like, okay, Order are gonna try and do something this year. And then there was a HLTV thread where somebody said, I have inside sources and Azza is going to come and be the in-game leader of Order. Watch this space. You heard it here first. And they posted that on a throwaway. Well, what actually happened was, a day after that, Order announced that they were fucking bankrupt. And the person that had just done like a $5.3 million cash raise was going to be unavailable. It seemed to me a bit weird. You've made a move for a player when, of course, as a player leaves, that's the perfect juncture to shut down your org if that's your intention, rather than fuck up someone else's life by making them think they've got a job that they don't. So Order is completely dead, apparently. They are out. They have filed for insolvency. I've seen the documents myself. Apparently there's loads more to the story. I've been poking around the edges. It might be something. It might be nothing. It might just be another fucking day in esports. But I gotta say, I feel massively sorry for this player. Thinks he's getting a good opportunity to play on one of, Australia and New Zealand's premier organisations. A 17-year-old player finally getting called up to the bigs. And, I say finally, I think he played on order briefly at some point, and then he got benched again or something. I can't remember the exact. But anyway, turns out all irrelevant, because he's not going to fucking have that opportunity, because the org's gone. It's just gone overnight, as is often the way. So yes, that's over. Poizon has entered free agency. The Bulgarian Orpa has left Fnatic after being picked up. He had one good performance, I believe, in the ESL Pro League, and people were wondering, what he was going to do next. But yeah, this is a player I kind of feel a bit sorry for him. I don't know if I've got a soft spot for Bulgarian Orpas, because I feel the same way about Cirque. But, I remember Poizon back in the Complexity era, and how good he could be, and how he was like, it felt like he was an elite level player. Never really did that consistently when he was at Fnatic, and now he's in free agency. Obviously, Fnatic have replaced him with Nikodos and completely rebuilt their team from scratch. But for me, Poizon now is a player that, someone's got to want to give him a go. I don't know who it would be. I don't know where he could squeeze in. It's very hard, because if you look at the top 20 overall at the moment, just between like 5 and 20, you can see how close everyone is together. Could be another player Sprout might keep tabs on. Maybe that could be a good bit of business. I don't know, but I feel like he's too good to stay in free agency for too long. It's just very hard to think of a place where he could be a fit. Maybe some of the old Scar Day guys feel like they want to pick him up. I do believe they kind of disbanded, but we'll wait and see. Bottom line is, I feel he's like a player who, again, been super unlucky in his career. Definitely deserves a second look from some of the organizations that are out there. I did talk a little bit about it on my last stream, and that is that Simple is going to take a break for an undetermined amount of time. We don't know how long it's going to be. We don't know how many tournaments he's going to miss. We don't even know if he's going to come back at all. The messaging around it has been very, very strange. The decision for him to take a break was originally announced by Luis Mira at Deserto. It was then subsequently confirmed, I believe, by Na'Vi themselves on their Instagram. Then what happened next was Simple had said, yep, good luck to you. Head Trick, who was obviously in the Na'Vi Academy that you've seen in the WePlay League, going to be stepping up and picking up the AWP. Then Simple said, big news announcement coming in soon, but this was after it was already in the public domain that he was going to be taking a break. And then Na'Vi have again confirmed it as we were heading into Blast that yes, actually Head Trick will be stepping in for Simple. So this is an interesting one, because this could well be a move that lasts for a while. And just to put it into context, they had Boomich go out because of all of that shit with his wife, pro-Putin sentiment, and the CEO of Na'Vi having absolutely zero truck with that, and not even being willing to forgive Boomich his wife's transgressions. They brought in some Dai Young, bit of a journeyman in the scene, but they were still capable of getting to the finals with him in. A lot of people have been quite complimentary about some Dai Young, and fair enough. They seem to like him. Blade seems to like him. They said they're going to keep him in there. Now, losing Simple, and they've got to bring in Head Trick. Now, Head Trick has looked all right in the WePlay League. He's only 18. He's got a relatively decent rating for the opponents that Na'Vi Junior are playing. He's at 1.7, 1.07. But at the end of the day, they're losing the GOAT. And they're losing him and replacing him with a junior. And I don't know how long that's going to be for. So you have to start thinking that actually Na'Vi are going to start becoming ultra reliant on Bit. Remember, Electronic is now the IGL. Reasonable to expect his stats to take a hit. And so this is going to really mix things up at the top, because I don't expect Na'Vi to stay second while Simple's out. And let's not forget, you've got Cloud9, obviously formerly Gambit, the Russians. They're waiting in the wings to move up the rankings. Astralis have had a win today, so everyone's jerking off about Astralis again, because Farlig had a good game. Don't know why. Ninjas in Pajamas seem to have put the device stuff to bed, which we'll talk about in a second. I just look at that And I feel that I think FaZe will stay top, and I think the beneficiaries are going to be Vitality, probably, and it gets hard after that. Really, it's up for grabs. Anybody could get that second spot. You know, Cloud9 are probably favorites. They're currently third, but it could just go anyway. Na'Vi making these two changes that we can reasonably expect them to fall off, plus L, plus ratio, at the next couple of tournaments. It's up for grabs, guys. This is it. It's now or never. We don't even know what kind of player Simple is going to come back as. Simple might take a break, and like Team Liquid famously in 2019, might never get his mojo back. So it's a super interesting time for the game, because Na'Vi have been the team to beat. Na'Vi have been the spectre in that world table. You have to overtake them, and then you have to fend them off to stay number one. It's been that way since 2020. And so it seems to me that Na'Vi losing Simple is huge. Huge for the scene, huge opportunity for all the teams chasing, huge opportunity, for example, for G2 to win trophies. Spoiler, they're not going to win trophies. But, you know, it's an opportunity and it should be taken. So I thought that was interesting. There was also a story as well in Jackson. That's Jackson, the Danish outlet Jackson GG. They did a story here. It says, device exploring options. Now, I don't give a fuck anymore, because I'm essentially out of the game, you know, so I can just speak my mind. I'm a fan like you all now, so whatever. What was being talked about behind the scenes, as many of you know, we talked about this back when I was doing By the Numbers, that at the end of the day, Device was wanting to go back to Astralis, and Astralis were receptive to that idea, provided they can make the deal work. The problem you've got, apparently, is that NIP have benched him, and remember, he's been benched for essentially medical reasons, because of stress, and so he's got a doctor's note. I think the Swedish government pay the doctor's note salary. Again, these are things that I've heard. And so, obviously, it looks to me that he's ready to come back and play. He's been grinding face all this time, but because of either this sick note, or because NIP don't want to sell him, or no one's willing to meet the buyout price, basically, he's just been in limbo all of this time. And I'll tell you, it's my read on the situation, and certainly from what I've heard in the background, he wants to play. He wants to get back in the game. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, it's not happening. So it was reported over on Jackson today that he has explored several options outside of his current team. The report says the news follows a 7-month stint of inactivity of the player as he benched himself in 2021, citing burnout and fatigue. According to Jackson's sources, Device has held preliminary talks with several teams. While most talks centered around him potentially joining an existing lineup, Jackson has learned of at least one case where a new organization would enter CSGO by signing Device and other Danish elements. One of those elements you would have to think would be Valde. I don't know who the would be, but anyway, Device signed for Ninjas in Pajamas in April as one of the most decorated CSGO players, and the transfer was reputed to be worth $1 million. The NIP COO, Jonas Gunnarsson, called the Device transfer one of the biggest in the history of esports. Now we can safely say it's one of the worst, isn't it? It's one of the worst in the history of esports, because he didn't even fucking play. He went to NIP, you got all the hype, all the excitement, you even got away with the inherent strangeness of the move, and in the end, Device now basically has just been on a bench, probably not even costing the org all that much money, and wants to get back into a team, but obviously signed, I think it was a 3-year contract, so you've got those golden handcuffs, and now he's wasted one of his prime years before retirement inevitably looms. I've got to say, I know this isn't popular sentiment. I think the whole thing's been terribly handled. I think the messaging's been terribly handled. There needed to be clearer messaging around it, in the sense that fans have a reasonable expectation to be told what's going on with players. I saw some leaked messages from inside, like, the fan Discord, where basically that Jonas guy, I think it was saying to people, you've got no right to know what's going on, and blah, blah, blah. And I think, look, that's true to a certain degree, but just manage people's expectations. It was all in this weird, like, you know, Hampus would say he's not coming back, and then everyone goes, oh, he's not coming back, and then you're saying, oh, it's actually not accurate, that was mistranslated. Then you've got Hitcham Shaheen saying, when we get Device back, we'll be straight fire, then deleting the tweet. It's just created uncertainty. And in the long run, NIP's messaging has actually harmed Device's career to a certain degree. What do I mean by that? Well, put it this way. If I'm looking for an AWPer and I know that Device is on the market, then I'm going to go and get Device. I'm going to hold talks, especially if I can get him for a deal, get him for a song. right? But what has happened here is NIP have basically hidden the reality of whether or not he is available. It's all burnout, it's all illness, He can't talk to anyone, Device, until now, for whatever reason. And so it's fucked up because, like, Device could have been getting offers, could have been having trials, could have been loaned out. None of that happened. And you don't know who decided not to make an offer because of the public perception around the player being a bust. So they certainly had to manage expectations a little bit. They didn't. The Device move's been an unmitigated disaster. It is now officially the biggest failure since Snacks to Mouse Sports. Yeah, I got to say, I do actually feel sorry for Device. I want to see him back on the server. You know, who doesn't, right? Other than NIP, evidently. So we'll wait and see.
He's the man to do the damage. Oh! As he looks for another headshot! Responsibility